So today, we're reviewing a gun that I've been putting off for the last 8 months. And that is, of course, the EMG Colt and Daniel Defense licensed Mk18 Mod 1 in two-tone, OEM by King Arms and SOCOM Gear. Just as a quick note, this is the first AEG I have owned that has aluminum receivers, and I must say I'm quite impressed with the heft it has compared to an AEG that utilizes nylon poly receivers. Definitely has a weight comparable to real steel AR-15s I have held in the past. However, I'll touch on that a little bit more later, as it's time to go over the externals of this rifle first, like I usually do. So starting off with the muzzle of the gun, I have replaced the orange flash hider originally attached with a standard black A2 birdcage flash hider. The original orange flash hider was held into place with a single roll pin on the bottom and some glue on the threads, so getting it off was a bit of a hassle. But with some patience and the right method, it's doable. And once it's removed, reveals the standard 14mm negative or counterclockwise threads commonly seen on AEGs. I just chose the standard A2 flash hider since it was cost effective and very clean looking. I plan on replacing it with a Surefire 4-prong if the opportunity should arise. The gun does come with a crush washer with a single O-ring positioned below the muzzle device to ensure it has a tight fit with the correct orientation. Moving on to the barrel, it has a 10.5 inch length, which is not the correct length for a truly proper Mk18. Real Mk18s come with 10.3 inch barrels. A negligible difference on paper, but quite magnified when you use certain mock suppressors with this particular rifle. It's Airsoft, so it's not exactly a deal breaker, and I currently don't have the right mock suppressor for it anyways. There is indeed a Mark 12 style gas block with mock gas tube on the outer barrel. However, the mock gas tube is very loose and rattly on mine. Very noisy, but this seems to be a rather common issue based on other reviews I have seen and read. It doesn't bother me too much, but can detract from a player's stealthy approach if not fixed in some way. This replica is sporting the ever iconic 9.5 inch RIS-2 handguard in that famous burnt bronze color. The feel and details of it are absolutely fantastic. It's a very high quality rail complete with Daniel Defense trademarks and numbering on the Picatinny slots. The color is gorgeous, very close to the real deal. Not quite as close as VFC's iteration of the RIS-2, but a very close second in my opinion. Much better than the super orangey, sometimes reddish finish that old Mad Bull RIS-2 rails came with, or flat out tan rails like those seen on Matrix and Specna Mk18s. The only real gripe I have is the for Airsoft use only, laser printed on the bottom of the handguard, but it's not like anyone's gonna look under there. The handguard is precisely machined from 6061 T6 aluminum, the same material the real rail is made of. So rest assured that this rail will probably outlive the rest of the replica. It can feel slightly sharp to a bare hand, but it's definitely one of the better feeling quad rails out there. And gloves and or rail covers are an easy fix if you still find it too harsh on your hands. This rail, I would argue, is the heart and soul of this gun, and for this price range, I'm glad they did a rather good job with it. Moving on to the upper and lower receivers, I am glad to tell you that in addition to the receivers themselves, all the controls on it are made of metal. Even the fake forward assist. The trigger, magazine release, charging handle, and bolt release are all made of metal, something other manufacturers miss. Speaking of the bolt release, it actually works. Pulling back the charging handle will open the metal dust cover and lock back the mock bolt which reveals your hop-up unit, and pressing the bolt release will shoot your mock bolt forward. Very satisfying. I also forgot to mention that the selector switch is also made of metal and has a very tactile and audible click every time you switch it from safe, semi to full auto. And of course, how can we overlook the sexy Colt trades this thing comes with? Very deeply engraved into the lower, so you don't have to worry about it ever being scratched up to the point where you can't make out the trades anymore. Not as refined looking as VFC or GHK's Colt trademarks, but still very well done and really completes the aesthetic of this replica as a military rifle. Did I mention that each gun has its own unique serial number? It's little details like these that really set apart certain replicas from others. I would like to point out that the flat top rail on the upper doesn't have numbering on the slots, which sucks, but again isn't too big of a deal, especially when you have irons in an optic, such as my Repro EXPS-3 here, occupying much of the space. As we move further back, we see that this replica does not come with a CQBR sling plate commonly seen on Mk18s, but rather a normal plate without anywhere for slings to clip onto. The buffer tube is your typical 6-position buffer tube and comes with a castle nut that can be tightened or loosened, A very welcome detail compared to the usual AEG buffer tube where the castle nut is only molded onto the tube. The rear plate, castle nut, and buffer tube are also made of metal, just as they should be. The buffer tube is a stress point on the gun and should never be made of polymer. My Mk18 came with a basic but very functional soft mod style stock in tan with black rubber padding and QD sling point, but some of the later production models from this line come with an EMG Alpha stock, which I have here. Both are very good quality, but the EMG Alpha stock seems to have more space and is able to fit batteries easier, not to mention it's a more ergonomic stock given the sloped angle of the rear. However, the Alpha stock's battery compartment is difficult to access compared to the soft mod stock, is harder to remove from the buffer tube in the event of disassembly, and also lacks a QD sling point. And for those reasons, I choose to use the soft mod stock 99% of the time. Removing your stock also reveals your wiring, which is wired to Dean's, which is a huge step up from the small Tamiya seen on most stock guns. Just to round off the externals part of this video, you can see that this gun is very solid, and with that comes some heft. As mentioned earlier, this feels as heavy as some real steel AR-15s I've held, and just to give you an idea of how accurate this statement is, a real Mk18 from Daniel Defense, yes I know it's not the same as the military-issued Mk18 my replica is based off of, but close enough, is listed as 5.71 pounds on their website. The EMG Mk18 is listed as 2,800 grams on the eVike website. That is 6.17 pounds compared to the 5.71 pounds of a real Mk18, making this an ideal replica to copy any real steel Mk18 setup and do some sort of training with. Moving on to the internals, I have yet to disassemble the gearbox, as I'm not too confident in my ability to disassemble this gearbox and not screw something up. So instead, have the screenshot from the review by Airsoft Russ. Links to his channel and review will be in the description. As for a parts list, here's a list of parts from the EMG Builders M4, courtesy of Bob. The EMG Builders M4 is just a stripped down black M4A1 Block 2 from the same line as my Mk18, so rest assured this is an accurate parts list for the gearbox. However, I have a dry fire test I recorded a few months back demonstrating its rate of fire and trigger response on a 7.4 volt LiPo, so I'll drop that in right here to give you guys a rough idea of the performance. So first let's go on semi. Let's feel that trigger. There's maybe 2 millimeters of play, and then it's a rather firm trigger pull. Okay, then on full auto, it's nothing special, but it's decent enough. Just as a side note, this replica cannot handle an 11.1 volt LiPo stock. It will fry the MOSFET in contacts very quickly, and can cause overspin according to other owners. Something I can show you directly from my Mk18 is the stock hop-up setup, as I replaced it with a Max ME Pro paired with an R-Hop Lambda Smart 03 inner barrel. The stock hop-up chamber is a one-piece metal hop-up with a standard wheel for adjustment. Slightly disappointing given this is a higher end AEG with a usual price tag of around $335 to $350. Crytax and VFCs usually fall into this price range, and both have rotary style hop-ups as standard on their models. Not to mention mine was missing the main pin that keeps the hop-up arm in place, and was being held onto the hop-up only by this gear right here. Thankfully, I had a spare pin from another hop-up unit I own while I waited to get a max hop-up chamber. The inner barrel seems to be of okay quality, albeit a tad dirty when I first got it. The hop-up bucking and nub also seemed to be alright when I first inspected it, but I suggest replacing the bucking as soon as possible since this is the easiest, cheapest, and most cost-effective upgrade you can do out of the box, alongside thoroughly cleaning your inner barrel. I don't have much data to share regarding mag compatibility, but besides the stock mag fitting and feeding fine, a Matrix PMag styled high cap and JG standard high cap both fit and fed fine as well. However, as soon as I swapped out my hop-up chamber for the Max ME Pro, I lost compatibility with the stock mag and JG high cap, so the only mag that fit out of those three was the Matrix high cap. I also have a Weescar L high cap that also fits and feeds fine with the Max for some reason, so do with that what you will. Before I end this video, I ought to mention some of the items this replica comes with in the box. First off, the Mk18 comes with these CAC style sights already attached. The front sight is adjustable for elevation, while the rear sight is adjustable for both windage and elevation. However, the aperture was very small, around the same size as those found on 600-meter sights. So I opened it up with a drill so it might actually be useful for CQB in case my Repro Hollow goes down. You also get this really shitty high-cap T-Mag in black, and good grief is it awful. It fits and feeds fine, that is until one of the gears inside comes loose from the winding mechanism alongside the pin that holds it in place after a few mags. Easy enough to put back in, but this is a liability in terms of reliability. It's just not worth using. You also get a nice little certification card, so that's nice, but no physical instructions. So what's the verdict? Is it worth it? The question is, are you worth it? All memes aside, I do believe that this is a great representation of the Mark 18 and a solid primary out of the box. However, given some of the QC issues I came across on mine and overall lack of performance expected at this price range, I am somewhat hard-pressed to recommend this at full price. Thankfully, I snagged this when it was on sale for only $280, and I recommend doing exactly just that. However, no matter what price you snag this at, sale or full, does not change the fact that this is a solid base for any Mark 18 build you may want to do. Sure, some internals are in need of an upgrade, but given this is a Tokyo Marui spec AEG, this is simple enough. So in conclusion, whether you're a multicam enthusiast, a casual player, or even one of the Speedy Boys, if you fancy a Mark 18, this replica might be worth checking out. But remember, it doesn't matter how expensive or Gucci your gun is if you don't know how to use it. Make sure you put in the time practicing your skills so you play as good as your gun looks. Hopefully this review was informative, and don't forget to drop a like if you found this review well made and helpful. So until next time, stay safe and have a good one.